Good day everyone, we are the reporters of GROUP-4 and our topic for today is all about the Module 5 which is Global and Regional Economic Cooperation and Integration.
International economic cooperations among nations. In the post-World War II environment, countries came to realize that a major component of any achieving of global peace was global corporations politically, economically, and socially. The intent was to level the trade of playing field and reduce economic areas of disagreement, since inequality in these areas could lead to a serious conflict among the initiatives. Nations agree to work together and promote free trade, entering the bilateral and multilateral agreement. Which means na pagkatapos ng World War II environment, ang corporations politically, economically, and socially ay four major of component to achieve global peace. At layunin ng mga ito na i-level up ang trade playing field at bawasan ang mga pang-ekonomiyang lugar na hindi na pagkakasunduan. Nations choose to work together para i-promote ang free trade sa pagpasok ng bilateral at multilateral agreement. General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, or GATT, is a series of rules governing trade that were first created in 1947 by 23 countries. GATT, also known as General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, has been credited substantially expanding global trade, primarily through the reduction of tariff. Which means na pagkat noong 1947 ang GATT or General Agreement on Tariff and Trade ay unang nalikha ng 23 countries sa Palais Nations in Geneva. At ito ay nakredit sa malaking pagpapalawak ng global trade. The basic underlying principle of GATT, or General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, was that trade should be free and equal. In other words, countries should open their markets equally to member nations, and that should be neither discrimination or special or preferential treatment, which means ang pangunahing pinagbabatayan ng GATT or General Agreement on Tariff and Trade ay dapat ang trade ay libre pantay or free and equal. At dapat walang discrimination at espesyal na pagtrato. Dapat pantay-pantay pagtrato sa lahat ng bansa. For example, if the United States apply a tariff or tax of 2.6% on printing press sa pag-import from the European Union, which is ang European Union ay isa sa lugar ng WTO or World Trade Organization, ay dapat din na mag-apply ng 2.6% tariff or tax on printing press sa pag-import to every other WTO member countries. Most Favored Nations Clause, or MFN, ay isa sa GATT o General Agreement on Tariff and Trade Case Provision. Ito ay nangangailangan na kapag napagkasunduan ng dalawa o higit pang bansa ang isang benefits, usually pagbabawas na din siya sa tariff, at automatic extended sa lahat ng ibang pang member country. At ang GATT or General Agreement on Tariff and Trade ay unang nakafocus sa tariff, which is tax are placed sa pag-import at pag-export. World Trade Organizations or WTO, formed officially January 1, 1995. The concept of WTO had been developed for several years. When the WTO replaced GATT, it absorbed all of GATT's standing agreement. In contrast to GATT, which was a series of agreements, the WTO was designed to be an actual institution to charge with the mission of promoting free and fair trade, which means na nung January 1, 1995, officially nabuo ang WTO o World Trade Organization. At ang konsepto nito ay na-develop ng ilang taon. At ang WTO ay isang world organization na tumatalakay sa mga rules or principles ng trade sa pagitan ng mga bansa. Ang WTO o World Trade Organization ay disenyo upang maging isang aktwal na institusyon para sa misyon ng pagtataguyod ng malaya at equal trade. Also, at ang purpose ng WTO o World Trade Organization ay magsilbi bilang isang negotiating forum para sa mga member country ng WTO or World Trade Organization. Also, layunin din ng WTO o World Trade Organization na tulungan ang mga producer at services at mga importer na magsagawa ng kanilang mga negosyo. For example, ibinaba ng WTO o World Trade Organization ang mga hadlang sa trade at in-increase ang trade sa mga member country. Therefore, sinubukan ng WTO na mag-provide sa pamamagitan ng negotiation na ang nakikinabang ay ang global economy.
World Trade Organization Agreement on Trade-Related Aspect of Intellectual Property Rights. Intellectual property, from the word itself intellectual. Creators of the particular property has the right to benefit from the creation he made. In other words, intellectual property is a very crucial thing to protect our invention in any kinds of form. Furthermore, as a creator, we have other advantage from these properties. And if one illegally counterfeits, imitates of our invention, they are subject to legal punishment and consequences. Regional economic integration has enabled to focus on issues that are relevant to their stage of development, as well as encourage trade between neighbors. First is free trade area. This is the most fundamental type of economic collaboration. Member of countries remove all trade barriers between themselves. Second is custom union. As in free trade zone, this promote economic cooperation. Trade barriers between member of countries are abolished. The main distinction from a free trade zone is the member agree to treat non-member countries. Trade in the same way. A good example is the Gulf Cooperation Council. Third is common market. This form of agreement permits member countries to create economically interconnected. Any trade obstacle as well as restriction, movements of labor, capital between member countries are eliminated. There is a single trade policy for commerce with the non-member countries, similar to custom unions. The main benefit for workers is that they no longer require a visa or authorization to work in another common market member nation. Fourth is economic union. When countries enter into an economic agreement to remove trade barriers and adopt common economic policies, this type is created the European Union.
A trade bloc, specifically a free trade zone or near free trade zone formed by one or more tax, tariff, and trade agreements between two or more countries. Some trading blocs have resulted in agreements that have been more substantive than others in creating economic cooperation. A trading bloc is a group of countries that works together to provide special deals for trading. This promotes trade between specific countries within the blocs. The European Union is an example of trading blocs. Of course, there are pros and cons for creating regional agreement. The pros of creating regional agreements include the following: trades creation, employment, opportunities, and consensus and cooperation. The cons involved in creating agreement include the following: trade diversion, employment shift, and reduction loss of national sovereignty. The advantages of regional integration: it is allow countries to overcome this costly division, integration goods, services, and factors market, thus facilitating the flow of trades, capital, energy, people, and the idea. Regional integration can be promoted through common physical and institutional infrastructure. Major areas of regional economic integration and cooperation. There are more than 100 regional trade agreements in place, a number that is continuously evolving as countries reconfigure their economic and political interests and priorities. The number one is North America or NAFTA. The North American Free Trade Agreement (NAFTA) came into being during a period when free trade and trading blocs were popular and positively perceived. In 1988, the United States and Canada signed the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement, when Canada asked to be party to any negotiations to preserve its right under the Most Favored Nation Clause or MFN. The goal of NAFTA has been to encourage trade between Canada and United States and Mexico. The NAFTA have some key goals like to reduce barriers to trade, to increase cooperation for improving working conditions in North America, to create an expanded and safe market for goods and services produced in North America, to establish clear and manually advantageous trade rules. Number 2, South America Mercosur. The Common Market of the South, Mercado Común del Sur or Mercosur, was originally established in 1988 as regional trade agreement between Brazil and Argentina, and then was expanded in 1991 to include Uruguay and Paraguay. Over the past decade, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru has become associated member, and Venezuela is in the process for full membership. Mercosur has brought nations with long-standing rivalries together. Although this is an economic trade initiative, it has been also designed with clear political goals. Mercosur's purpose is to promote free trade and to fluid movement of goods, people, and currency. The number 3 is CARICOM and Andean Community. The Caribbean Community and Common Market, or also called CARICOM, or simplified the Caribbean Community, was formed in 1973 by countries in Caribbean with the intent of creating a single market with the flow of goods, services, labor, and investment. The Andean Community, called the Andean Pact until 1996, is it a free trade agreement signed in 1969 between Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. Eventually, Chile dropped out, while Venezuela joined bloc for about 20 years and left in 2006. This trading bloc has limited impact for the first 2 decades of its existence, but has experienced a renewal of interest after Mercosur's implementation. The number 4 is CAFTA-DR. The Dominican Republic, Central America, United States Free Trade Agreement or CAFTA-DR is a free trade agreement signed into existence in 2005. Originally, the agreement then called the Central America Free Trade Agreement or CAFTA encompassed discussion between the U.S. and the Central America countries of Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. The goal of agreement is the creation of a free trade area similar to NAFTA. For free trade advocates, the CAFTA-DR is also seen as a stepping stone toward the eventual establishment of the Free Trade Area of Americans, or also called FTAAA, more ambitions, groping for a free trade agreements that would encompass all the South America and Caribbean nations. That's all.
So the number 5 major areas of regional economic integration and cooperation is Europe-EU. The European Union or EU is the most integrated form of economic cooperation. The EU originally began in 1950 to end the frequent wars between neighboring countries in the Europe. The six founding nations were France, West Germany, Italy, and the Benelux countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Netherlands, all of which signed a treaty to run their coal and steel industries under a common management. The focus was on the development of the coal and steel industries for peaceful purposes. The EU identified three M's. First M is establishes a single common currency which went into effect in 1999. B. Sets up monetary and fiscal targets for member countries. And the last M is the treaty called for a political union which would include the development of a common foreign and defense policy and common citizenship. So the importance of this Europe-EU or European Union is over half a century of peace, stability, and prosperity. It also plays an important role in diplomacy and works to promote the same benefits as well as democracy, fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law across the world. And that's the Europe-EU.
My assigned topic is all about the EU governance or European Union governance. First is, what is EU governance? EU governance is the expressions European governance designate the body of rules, procedures and practices that relate to the way powers and exercise in the European Union. The objectives is to strengthen democracy uh, at the EU level and to bring citizens closer to the EU institution. European governance is based on the following principle. First is setting up the transparency of EU institution. Second is involving civil society in decision making. Third is framing and implementing consistent and well-managed policies. Fourth is ensuring a clear, stable, and predictable regulatory framework supporting of growth and jobs. Fifth is respecting the principles of proportionality and subsidiarity, uh, and ensuring that reach of EU institutions and EU member state and takes responsibility for what is does and in European the European Union. Last is contributing to the global governance debate with a view of improving operations of international institutions. Several institutions involved in making decisions of EU level in particular. First is a European Council. The European Council provide the political leaderships of the EU for the EU or European Union. The European Council is collegiate body that defines the overall political directions and priorities the European Union. It composed of the heads of state of government of the EU members, uh, the president of the European Council, and the president of the European Commission. Second is the European Commission. The European Commissions provide the day-to-day leaderships and initiates legislation. The European Commissions, it is the politically independent executive arm. It is alone responsible for drawing up proposals for new European legislations, and its implement the decides of the European Parliament and Councils of the EU. And the third is European Parliament. The European Parliament forms one half of the EU. The European Parliament is one of the three legislative branches of the European Union, and one of its seven institutions. Together with the councils of the European Union, it adopts European legislations commonly of the proposals of the European Commission. And what is the role of European? The European Parliament prepares the laws and ministers the laws of the European Union together with the Council of Ministers. The Parliament also approves the Union budget. The Parliament oversees the activities that commissions and the EU institution. The fourth is Councils of European Union. The Councils of the European Union functions uh, as the other half of the EU legislative body. The Councils of European Union often referred to it in treaties and other official documents simply as the Council. The informally known as the Council of Ministers is a third of the seven institutions of the European Union as listed in the Treaty of European Union. And what is the role of the Councils of European Union? Overview, uh, in the councils of EU, informally also known as the Council, government ministers from each EU country meet to discuss, amend and adapt laws and coordinate policies. The ministers have the authority to commit their governments to the actions agreed into the meeting. Last is Court of Justice. Court of Justice makes up the judicial branch of EU, consisting of three different courts. It reviews, interprets, and applies the treaties and laws of the EU. Then the International Court of Justice, sometimes known as the World Court, is one of the six principal organs of the United Nations. It settles disputes between states of accordance with international law and gives advisory options on the international legal issues. How does the Court of Justice work? Court of Justice deals with requests for preliminary rulings from national courts, certain actions for annulments and appeals, general court rules of actions for annulment brought by individuals, companies, and in some cases of EU governments.
So we have the so-called the major areas of integration and cooperation. One of these are ASEAN. So ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, was created in 1967 by five founding members countries such as Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, and Philippines. So those countries are being reunited for them to promote economic and cultural exchange among its member countries, maintain peace and stability, and Southeast Asian and establish relationship with the foreign powers with similar aims. So the next one is APIC, or the Asia Pacific Economic Corporation. Was founded in 1989 by 12 countries as an informal forum. So it has now the 21 members, economic on both sides of the Pacific Ocean. So the APIC is the only one regional or the trading group that uses term members economic that rather countries. So in deference to China, Taiwan was allowed to join the forum, but the only under the name Chinese Taipei. So the focus, or the primary focus of the APEC, is to promote sustainability or growth, trade, and investment and prosperity in the Asia Pacific region. So you have the so-called Middle East and Africa. So the Corporation Council for the Arab States of the Gulf also known as the Gulf Cooperation Council or GCC. It was created in 1981. So the six members are Bahrain, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia, Oman, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates. So as a political and economical organization, the group focuses on trade, economic, and social issues. So the GCC has become as much a political organization on an economic one. So the purpose of the GCC or the Gulf Cooperation and Council, so to effect or to connect or coordinate integration and interconnection among the members and states in all fields in order to achieve unity among the East Africa or AAC. The African Economic Community is an organization of the African Union States signed in 1991 and implemented in 1994. So it provides a first stage integration of the regional economic agreements. So the AAC intends for the foster creation of a free trade zone and customs union in its regional bloc. So beyond that, there are hopes for a shared currency and eventual economic, monetary, and union. So the purpose of the AAC or the African Economic Community is to the creation of free trades areas, customs unions, a single market, and a central bank and common currency.
How do this trade agreement and effort impact business? The trade agreements typically allow importers or business who procure imported goods access to lower cost goods. This can allow lower cost goods to flow more freely through the higher cost partner country. A counter-argument is that this trade agreement prevent the manufacture in certain goods in those higher cost partner countries. The United Nations and the impact on trade. We all know that the United Nations was formed in 1945 at the end of World War II to replace the League of Nations, which had been formed in 1919. Its original goals remain the same today, which is to maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations between nations, and to foster international cooperation in solving economic, social, humanitarian, and cultural issues. The United Nations' primary purpose is to promote peace between countries. Peace fosters stability, and that stability provides the framework for the expansion for business interests and trade. There are four most global that finds the operating in a stable environment leads to the best business operation for a range of reasons. First is staffing. It is easier to recruit skilled labor if the in-country conditions are stable and relatively risk-free. Companies have to pay in ever higher levels of hardship and risk-free and may still not necessarily be able to bring in the best talent. Or when we say staffing, it is a process of finding the right work with appropriate qualification or experience and recruiting them to fill a job position or role. Second is operation. It is a unstable environment companies fear loss or damage to property and investment. Or when we say operation, concerned with designing and controlling the process of product and redesigning business operation in the product of goods and services. For example is someone getting their appendix taken out. Third is regulation. Unclear and constantly changing business rules make it hard for firms to plan for the long term. Or when we say regulation, a rule or directive made and maintained by an authority, a certain situation regulation is very important in controlling the flow of business because if there is no stable regulation in a certain business, it makes firm hard to plan for long term. And the last, which is currency convertibility, and free-flowing capital. Often countries experiencing conflict often impose capital controls or restriction of money going in out of their countries. When we see currency convertibility, it refers to unrestricted right and currency holders to convert their balance into foreign exchange for payment. While in free-flowing capital embraces aspect relating to capital movement, balance of payment as well as foreign investment. Fifth is International Court of Justice. This body hears disputes between nations. When we say International Court of Justice, sometimes known as the word court, because it is the one of 6 principles in organs in the United States. It settles dispute between states in accordance with international law and gives advisory opinions on international legal issues.
The last main bodies of UN is the UN Trusteeship Council. While an official part of the UN chapter charged with overseeing all trusted territories under UN custody, this body is currently inactive. So in this UN Trusteeship Council, it is to help and ensure that trust territories were administered in the best interests of their inhabitants and of international peace and security. The 10 Principles of UN Global Compact. We have 4 categories of the principles of UN Global Compact. First is human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. In human rights, Principle 1, businesses should support and respect the protection of internationally proclaimed human rights. So, in Principle 1, respecting human rights means a business should use to due diligence to avoid infringing human rights and should address adverse human rights impacts which they are involved. In addition, beyond respecting human rights, business is encouraged to take action to support human rights. Principle 2. Make sure that they are not complicit in human rights abuses. We individuals, we should make sure that we cannot do bad things or we cannot do criminal cases to abuse human rights. Principle 3. Businesses should uphold the freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. How can companies uphold the right to collective bargaining? Making efforts to reach an agreement, carrying out genuine and constructive negotiation, avoiding unjustified delays, respecting the agreements concluded and applying them in good faith. Principle 4. The elimination of all forms of forced and compulsory labor. So in this principle, economic circumstances can compel people to barter away their freedom, and labor exploitation can occur in many forms, but forced labor is something quite distinct. Principle 5. The effective abolition of child labor. Child labor can result in extreme bodily and mental harm, and even death. It can lead to slavery and sexual or economic exploitation, and in nearly every case, it cuts children off from schooling and health care, restricting their fundamental rights and threatening their futures. That's why we cannot hire child age or young because it's too young to work with it. Principle 6 or the last principle of labor. The elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. Eliminating discrimination starts with dismantling barriers and ensuring equality in access to training, education, as well as the ability to own and use. So in environment, Principle 7, businesses should support a precautionary approach to environmental challenges. So in this principle, the key to a precautionary approach from business perspective is the idea of prevention rather than remediation. In other words, it's more cost-effective to take early action to ensure that environmental damage does not occur. Principle 8. Undertake initiatives to promote greater environmental responsibility. To promote environmental responsibility, we should implement a recycling program, conserve energy within the office, promote a paperless office, support green vendors, reduce by reusing, invest in office plants, conserve human energy, and encourage sustainable transportation. Principle 9. Encourage the development and diffusion of environmentally friendly technologies. Saving environment with technology is very important to us. Developing renewable energy technology, one of the most significant ways to contribute to saving the environment is to sustainably generate and use the available energy resources, saving endangered wildlife, and adopting a smarter lifestyle. The last principles is the businesses should work against corruption in all its forms, including extortion and bribery. The 10th principle against corruption was adopted in 2004 and commits UN Global Compact participants not only to avoid bribery, extortion, and other forms of corruption, but also to proactively develop policies and concrete programs to address corruption internally and within their supply chains. Companies are also challenged to work collectively and join civil society, the UN or United Nations, and governments to realize a more transparent global economy.